Welcome back, you guys, and welcome to people who are joining us. This is the third in our 5-part series. The main thing you guys need to know is that we are going to be having a Q&A at the end, and we would love for you to fill our Q&A box with all of your questions, and you can do that throughout. We will definitely be getting to those towards the end, and you've all been asking some great questions. And I would like to introduce you to your co-host, Dr. Heidi Hutner, who's an associate professor at Stony Brook University. She writes about environmental issues, and currently she's working on a documentary, Accidents Can Happen, The Women of 3 Mile Island, as well as a companion book of the same name. Her writing appears in the New York Times, Ms. Mag Long Reads, PRI, Ion, Yes, Dame, and others. She has books and chapters in books with Oxford, UP, UVA, and more. She hosts the webisode Coffee with H times 2, a sustainability interview series. And don't miss her TEDx, Eco-Feminism and Eco-Grief. And we also have Dennis Yuri, an Iroquois musician, composer, and environmentalist. For many years, he was the director of the Native Day Thanksgiving at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine in New York City. And he's worked on many projects in film, television, and theater. He's currently the musical director of Unto These Hills in Cherokee, North Carolina, and has continued to use his music as a conduit to aid Native American and environmental issues. I'll turn it over to these two.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Happy to be here with Heidi and our special guest, who I'd like to introduce now. We have tonight Tiokasin Ghosthorse. Tiokasin is a member of the Cheyenne River Lakota Nation of South Dakota, and he is an international speaker on peace and the Indigenous and Mother Earth perspective. I first met Tiokasin at the Native American Day of Thanksgiving at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine in New York City around the turn of the century. 2002, we're not that old. Tiokasin has a long history of Indigenous activism and advocacy. He spoke at the United Nations in Lake Geneva, Switzerland when he was only 15 years old. He is an active board member of Simply Smiles, Green Cross International, and the Center for Earth Ethics. Tiokasin was a 2016 nominee for a Nobel Peace Prize from the International Institute of Peace Studies and Global Philosophy. He was selected for the 2016 Native Arts Cultural Foundation Fellowship. Oh, excuse me. Oh my God. Sorry about that, everyone. It's one of those nights. One of those nights. He's an active board member of Simply Smiles, Green Cross International, and the Center for Earth Ethics. Tiokasin was a 2016 nominee for a Nobel Peace Prize from the International Institute of Peace Studies and Global Philosophy. He was selected for the 2016 Native Arts Cultural Foundation Fellowship and a nominee for a National Endowment for the Arts National Heritage Fellowship in 2018. He's also a National Native American Hall of Fame nominee in 2018 and 2019 Indigenous Music Award nominee for the Best Instrumental Album titled From the Continuum. He's the host of the internationally syndicated radio show First VoicesRadio, which he has been producing for 28 years and has over 100 affiliates. And I'm very proud to introduce my friend tonight, Mr. Tiokasin Ghosthorse. Welcome, Tiokasin.
Hey, thank you both for including me and asking me to come on and add a few thoughts to your thoughts. Thank you.
That's great. So I think maybe we can start out, if it's okay with you. Our whole purpose for being here is speaking about the environment and sustainability. So as in your travels all over the world and throughout the continent, what do you think are some of the most important issues that the Native and Indigenous peoples are dealing with today regarding a sustainable Earth and a green future?
Wow. That is a good question, and it's always answered differently because if you can stay with me, the earth changes every day. And I think to view the earth as if we humans change it, we're affected by it, or what we do or we don't do to the environment. But of all the adaptable, sustainable beings on this earth are actually animals and birds. They adapt so easily to the change that's going on, to climate change, what have you. And they're the ones that I think that indigenous peoples who know themselves actually take example from. They watch, they observe what the Western world would call wild, which really means with spirit. and we watch what's going on with the earth, and we change. And we're here to, how do you say, to work with the land rather than we plant according to the land, not plan the land. We don't manipulate the land. So therefore, you can see a difference in how we think about the land, not in ownership or stewardship, because those are possessive words. And those of you who know deeper indigenous languages know that that word is not at the center of our languages. And so it's very less anthropocentric than we think it is, because we're often taking Western concepts, mindsets, and applying it to indigenous folks, just like we're blueprinting the earth for a better future for civilization. And when I think about indigenous peoples sustaining and having to deal with the current situation, is that I see us adapting, resilient, and yet taking our toll, taking our sacrifices as a species of human. Some to say that we need to go deeper and consider the current situation with the fear, even with the deaths that are happening to Native peoples all over the world, indigenous folks, is that this being of fear is not being treated with respect. And I think we're making the earth the enemy, and the earth in the long run has control, and is just trying to get us to listen to how she listens. In other words, Earth listens to us. But we, in our benevolent way of human, is that no, we need to go to the Earth. We need to go out there and listen to the Earth. But it's only our application that we're doing to the Earth, rather than going and understanding that the Earth has been listening to us since before time, right? And she's been answering every need and want that we have as a human species. And so, are we following that path? Are we actually very dichotomous in our thought process against the Earth? We speak war languages of Earth. Against the Earth, we say there's bad weather. So indigenous peoples, I think there's a different attitude. The more traditional, the more deeper you know your language, I think the more you are seeing more clearly what needs to be done, and everything happening now is all the process of the continuum, so to speak.
I see. And that makes a lot of sense, because ever since I was a little kid, I was taught that myself. And sometimes these pandemics that come up, they kind of like show us that we are all a human family, and it kind of takes away the borders between the countries and everything, and the earth is telling us that we are all human family, and it doesn't recognize, all the divisive things that we create ourselves, and also that we're not in charge of the earth, because I spent my whole life in the woods as I was a kid, and still to this day try to learn as much as I can from it. So, but do you think like when these things happen, when these pandemics occur, and it kind of like just shows everyone that we're all here together on the earth, do you think there's a way that feeling can be sustained, or do you think it's going to go away as soon as this thing is like, settles wherever it's going to settle? Do you think that all of a sudden people are just going to go back, or do you think it has really changed humanity a little bit?
I think it has changed. I see that humanity in general, those who are hoping civilization returns to a normal right angle thinking process, will be in for a surprise, because it has changed. It is part of the millennial change, is part of the destiny change that what Native people have in our prophecies, because we've been with the earth as long as sustainability has. And when you think about sustainability, it's where we're not so much into growth, progress, or a better world. It's more about, it is and has been and was a thriving already for us. So we didn't have to grow. I think we're happier when we thrive, and it doesn't matter where we're from, as long as you understand what giving the earth gives, the giving consciousness that earth is. If we understand that, then we as humans in our DNA encoded have the empathy for the earth. That means that's where we start indigenous. It's not a concept or a word or alphabet. it's indigenous within us that brings about the sustainability. And so, you know, the ups and downs of our lives, daily lives, are often affected by the daily life of the earth, you know, who's always moving, always alive. So there's always a continuum. There's not really a night and day divided into time. And I think this is not an ideal. This is not a myth that we've been considered as indigenous folk to be a myth because we don't fit the rational logic of the West, where everything is a beginning and an ending, a solution-oriented society where we must have civilization. We must have the rules and regulations. And when we have that, we lack a lot of respect for the earth because we're being a good citizen while being a bad human being. Picking up trash in the park is part of being a good human being, but it's not doesn't define the human being. It's the way of living. So when people talk about the world is ending, I think about what world means. World means a way of living. And when they talk about the earth, we talk about who is living with the earth. And as I start the radio program out with an uncle who said, there's a way to live with earth and not a way not to live with earth. And it just so happens that we choose the way of earth. And because we see the power that she has, that we derive our thoughts, our processes from. And so sustainability is how we not achieve something down the line. It's where we are right now, how we deal with whatever tragedy or whatever happiness is happening. We're here now. We are it is what it is. And that's not a passive thought process. It is one where your consciousness is overwhelming the conscience of right and wrong, because consciousness is all about respect for everything. And in the old Lakota word, we have wakan, which I would say it could mean pure energy, but it also means to consciously apply mystery to everything. And so when you're in that, without conceiving it, if you're in that, you start understanding that's what Earth is. And that Earth grew me. The Earth gave the air, the water, the consciousnesses that are alive. All of those live in me. And so I think the cutoff point is when we think that they don't have consciousness, that they don't think. And we've had this way, all of our live-long languages that of Earth have been here so long that when we developed into an industrial military complex, we start losing that relationship. And so that's why a lot of words today, you're hearing nothing but connective words. Connecting, we have to connect, we have to do this, but there's nothing about relationship. We bypass it by saying, oh, we're all one. But there's no work with relationship to understand that. There's the knowledge and information and stats and measuring and science and religion, all the dogmatic thought process that we have that do not fit the earth, because that comes from a terror-filled history that started in another land, you see, and it came and spilled over this way. And now the great realization is happening, even among our own people. It's not that we are asleep or that we need to wake up. It's just as easy of being able to recognize where you come from, and that's who you are. We can't go find ourselves out in space and search and do more research to find out where we're coming from. But I use the word I a lot in this language, and in Lakota, it's rarely used. We don't use the word I. If someone in a room starts using the word I and comes explain to everybody in Lakota, the people would start laughing because it's like a joke. So we start laughing because a person is only talking about themselves and there's no relationship. So I think there's a difference in how we feel the language of Earth, or the language of the mental concept and ideals and the theories and all of those that appear that we have understanding, but it's only knowledge. And that knowledge is manipulated and controlled by those who write this language, English and whatever written language there is.
So I think you're talking about community. in a sense, right? Not just community among humans, but community like a world community, right? And connecting
So
to that.
yeah, and
Can
then
I
even
ask? Can I ask you a question? Do you
yeah,
mind?
yeah.
So I, I love what you're saying, and it's just really, really powerful. And just to clarify, I feel like that what we're seeing with so much environmental destruction comes out of the framework that you're talking about, which it comes out of colonization. It comes out of the white, the white Europeans coming to this country, coming to this land, and bringing this idea of sort of plundering and taking and remaking the land to make money out of it and profit and technology. Um, can you talk a little bit about that? And also, do you think it's possible that could be changed? Because it seems like we're still in that and it's so destructive.
I think if I could go back on my little studies and relationship and travels with other indigenous peoples across the world, is that we are, as indigenous folks, are in our next world, and this civilization, the modern so-called world, is finding its way out of it, but in a painful way. It's trying to tether itself to the old way when that way is there's like short routes to it. And I think to say that it was the white race or the black race or the red race, that's fine, because that construct comes out of the classist system that was brought here. When you're in a relationship in an egalitarian society, that doesn't have to exist, because we're identifying the behavior. And so when we identified behavior and we said, well, Washichu or Wetiko or Wendigo actually means one who becomes greedy, and in essence becomes too greedy. And I think that came out of a hard time in Europe somewhere, and maybe other parts of the world, where the natural resources that they lost respect for failed to give to them. So they went to grab their neighbor's goods, so to speak. And then that fear kept going and going. And then that's why the new America, the new land opened up and ordained by the 1493 papal bulls. And so that onset from that time on has been, it's been eating up. There's nothing else to eat. So now Mother Earth is gently, I say gently now, to give us this lesson that we've been using this same language to try to change things when it's the language that put us to sleep in the first place with, you see? And so when people are, what language, we have a new language, a new paradigm, a new world, a new discovery. And I'm saying, no, it's already here. We need to recognize and acknowledge that it's here already, instead of trying to raise a consciousness and go someplace else with it, because that's a directive from those who believe in dogma and want to go someplace else and bypass that. We have a consciousness here. We have to fulfill it now. We have to go into it. We have to birth with it and understand that it's our responsibility. We are free to do this now. We can do the gardens. We can do all those go-to things. But again, Heidi, I'm saying it's our default thinking. This is my second language I'm speaking to you. And when I speak to you in this language, it's not my default feeling, my thinking, but all of my thinking comes from the nasula, so to speak, that the brain is only a seat of the heart. And so when people talk about heart language, well, we say chante. Chante is like, we say heart as a noun, but chante actually means treeing. And I'm told te is a short word of te, which means to live, or has a capacity to make something live or die. And so chante is a treeing, living. So we're talking about the living treeing, and then that consciousness is one of the earth. And I described it before, the elemental consciousnesses of the water, the trees, the rocks, especially the rocks, the fire, all of those make this form. And this form thinks from those consciousnesses, those elemental intelligences, and it thinks through me. So, often I go outside or wherever I am, and I'm asking, what do you want me to say? What do you want me to feel? Not conceive or put into concept, so that the old world is given validation to stay around, because Earth has moved on, and people don't want to change, and I think we are changed already. So that's why I'm saying, and prior to Dennis's question, things have changed, and we just want things to return to normal, and they won't ever. I don't know if that answered your question, Heidi.
That's good. Thank you. Thank you.
You have another question, Heidi?
Well, you said something about, if I heard you correctly, being in another world. That that Indigenous people are in another world. Did I hear you correctly?
Yes, a lot. In 1992, 500 years after the discovery of the West by Columbus, and part of the prophecies throughout the Western Hemisphere by Native peoples, America was not here then. So we were native. Our origin stories goes back to when all land was one, you see, but that's not allowed because it has to start on a certain date of Christ's birth or the Greek realization of logic and reason. And so the world goes by, America goes by those thought processes. But if you go among the nations and the deeper ceremonies that we have, we knew this was going to happen. And now we know what to do. We have been prepared for this as Indigenous folks. And so when I say we are already in another world, that we had to work with this world right now in order to be prepared for this world coming in, and not a new world, but that new world is already here for us. And when I think about, in the sense of the languages being quantum physics, is that the other world is that we get more deeper and richer in communication with the plants, and you see other peoples now being pushed into nature or being called by nature. And that's the other world that we talk about. And when 1492 came along in 1992, when 200,000 Native people, Indigenous folks, marched in San Francisco, we were surrounded by all the paramilitary you want, and they were rolling out the guns and the ammunition and the machine guns and lining the streets with those paramilitary. And all we were doing is celebrating that we survived 500 years of this mess. And from that time, we began to wipe our tears, and the mist cleared, and we could see clearly. We could see very long way now. So I'm told by other Indigenous folks that it takes about a 20-year gestation period, and it's been 28 years now for this gestation period. So really, we as Native folks are maybe 20, 30 years ahead of this tethered civilization that's trying to hang on and continue to achieve great democracy. But it's really, for us as Native peoples, it's Earth democracy. She's speaking loud. She's saying, think of me first because I give you life. And I think that would sort of go to your question, Heidi, that we are in that other world already.
That's great. Go ahead, Heidi.
So this is something that concerns me a lot, and I wonder if you could speak to it. I'm concerned about things like nuclear waste, nuclear bombs, things that last for millions of years, the kinds of poisons that are in our environment and synthetic chemicals and, thousands of chemicals that are in our environment. Just if you could speak to that, what will happen with that and what we can do about that?
Well, I think anything, years ago when I was with elders who from Big Mountain and from Lakota country, talking about why uranium had to remain in the earth is the balance, and the monster, I guess you would call it. Some people would say that we knew that it was a deadly disease or deadly effects that came from that, because we had to leave those areas alone, but yet the society that deems it something powerful would go ahead, dig it up and spread it around on the surface. Often now we're finding ourselves in a dilemma of what do we do exactly. And I would say push it back, put it back, give it back, put it where it's supposed to be, and stop using the technology. Because obviously the technology has no logic to it, you know, to shoot ourselves in the foot by achieving lights and, you know, things to make us fly. And yet in the old days and even today, without mythologizing and idealizing and romanticizing Native people, these things are still happening. This is no secret. And so that we can speak our languages without ever giving away the secret, because language I'm speaking now will not hold this language. It's too quantum physics, it's two dimensional for this small cause and effect language that we're having. Metaphysically, in the metaphysical world, there is no cause and effect. So if you're working with that without a cause and effect and understanding the intuition of the earth and the communication with that, she will tell you what to do. And I can guarantee that when we were saying, in order to clean the mess up, you have to put things back and leave the earth as it is. Let her do the saving, because we obviously can't save ourselves, right? People will say, well, we can't save the earth, but we have to save ourselves. But no, we allow Mother Earth to do that. She will save us too. But we don't want to leave her alone because we're so used to planning and controlling and owning the earth that we can't think outside of that box. So when it comes to the nuclear waste, I guess you could say growing up in western South Dakota, where there are more than 2,000 open pit uranium mines still blowing around. In summertime, there's brown haze and it drops, you know, radiation all over, even in the Corn Belt, the bread belt, the bread basket of North America, in the states of Kansas and wherever those trade winds go. And I do know that there are so radioactively live hotspots that sometimes someone said they're, excuse me, 100 times more deadly than Hiroshima. So you have hotspots all around that we don't see because they're out there in the West and they're out of sight, out of mind. But what do we do with it? The elder that I was working with, and I won't say her name, she's done so much work to reveal this, that it's become the secret Chernobyl of this Western media glut. You will never hear about it unless basically somebody dies. I am a subject of growing up and taking little iodine pills, a whole jar, almost a gallon jar, for that whole year, 2 years after some of these nuclear test sites in Nevada were blown and the radiation settled over western South Dakota. So likewise, there's not very many of my people my age alive because we've been affected by that uranium. And so in bringing it to light and really speaking more to the enemy, so to speak, is that those mindsets that want to continue and try to build a nuclear world is only going to live by the sword, they're going to die by the sword. And I think to have free power is I think a wrong thinking also, because we're thinking economically the West. What can I get out of the earth yet? When she's not going to give it to you anymore, she's tired. And as a mother would be, she knows how much she has to give without spoiling the whole barrel, so to speak, right? And I think these sentiments that people would call them, we can't call them sentiments in the indigenous language because they're reality. We're living that reality. We're not using reality and putting it into books to sell a book. We're living those realities, and in those reservations you don't hear about out west. In the East Coast, they're hidden within the populace. But in the western part of this Turtle Island, even up into Canada, there are so many Native peoples that aren't even answering. They don't even want a computer. They don't want what is so-called progress, because the West is saying, get your word out. But that's not the way to get the word out. You talk to the intelligence of the earth to get your word out. And that assures at least that you are protecting the wild, you are protecting nature as you would have it, protecting the environment. And I think that's part of our part of our responsibility. And responsibility, all that means is freedom, or being free to handle more responsibility. Yeah.
I think that's great, and that's one of the reasons I'm really, really so glad you're here, because I think of like this this challenge that we have of like, if we can go back and we can quietly go back and let the earth heal us, but by the same token, we are so quiet that people aren't hearing us. So the people that are being heard are these people, like you said, that are out here with the message of we have to move forward, we have to take more, take more, take more. At the same time, Native peoples within themselves, they feel like we have to take less. We have to let the earth heal us, but we're not being heard. And so that's one of the reasons I think that your radio station is so great, and the fact that you have a radio station you've been doing for so long that is, dedicated to the voice of the First Nations. Because I remember Oren Lyons, I remember him at the United Nations saying, I speak for the eagles, right? Because who's speaking for the animals and who's speaking for the earth? And because we feel like sometimes we're the only ones paying attention to it, and we're trying our best to use less and use less. And I think, well, maybe you can speak to that. It's like, how is your radio show? How do you feel it's like been doing, and how you feel, about it?
Well, the radio program, of course, has been helped out by many other peoples, native and non-native, through the years, 28 years. And the program has been offered through 3 stations out in Olympia, Washington, where I started, and then moved to New York and the city. Now it's in the Catskills, but it's still going. The voices of those who basically had no voice are now coming to the forefront and being able to express in their own way without experts coming in and telling them how to say things, how to conceptualize, so that we can get that package and bring it back into great civilization called America and the Western domination. So it's always about, no, we don't want to be extracted anymore, because this is all we have left. This is all there is. We've given you everything. Why do you want more? But that's not up to us, because we can't own anything. That is a damning word to say, own or stewardship, because it's all about bringing things back, going out and bringing it back to, and that's part of colonization. And in the original Lakota, there's no word for colonization or decolonization, and yet we have all the young people running around talking this jargon, this terminology, decolonize. It's almost, that's what we're supposed to do. That's the formula given to you. So if we get that out of the way, then we could see clearly what our responsibilities really are to the earth. And this mindset in the mind that happens up here and keep chasing around trying to solve the mystery is different than accepting the mystery. It doesn't make you crazy when you accept that mystery. You go forward with that how do you say, the energy of understanding what we were born with. All the intelligence is encoded in this one big brain, one big heart, and we have a language to understand that. And rather than just from the shoulders on up, where everything is kind of theorized and then planned, and it's never worked that way. Earth doesn't have a plan. She's not a noun. She's a moving entity. And we've always known that. It's not a new thing to us. To other peoples it is. And you can hear the baby talk when they talk about the earth. It's a lot of baby talk to me. And it's like they use bigger words to talk more baby, but it gets all mixed up, and they forget to be simple. Basically, clean water. I mean, going to the ancestors, understanding that ancestors, by the way, are just not humans, you see, because the rocks are the oldest ancestor here. Then you got the fire, then the water, and you got all the other plants on the surface. As we are as humans, we are the last here, but we're the most least intelligent, right? Because we're still trying to learn how to live with the earth, and this society has told everybody and drummed it into our being that we have to have peace on the earth, because we're dominant. We're from God and we do this. And that is archaic thinking. That way of duality is really on its way out. And sometimes you find students, I have students from 20, 30 years ago that are saying, wow, that moment, just the one word, peace on earth and peace with earth, changed me when I was in elementary school, because I could understand it. I didn't have to write a book about it or read a book or go to a sermon or go to some conference, scientific conference. It was right there because it was truth. It was real. Because we've been having peace on earth for thousands of years, and this is where we've arrived with it. It's time to switch to peace with the earth. And people are going to go to the point of privilege as to how do we do that? It's like a manual or something. We have to experience earth and allow earth to experience us, because that's how it is. It's not a give and take relationship. It's only a relationship of giving. That's all it is.
Fascinating.
Really fascinating.
And I wonder, because I love, the song I wrote, Listen to the Children. I feel like that's part of my thought process all the time. And when you speak about like the native language and people, it seems like the kids grow up and they have that connection, in them when they're born and as they're coming into the earth, and they feel it. They feel that connection, and then they can see people being jaded and trying to talk them into maybe money's more important or this and that, and how now I see like the Green New Deal, the Sunrise Movement, things like that, they're coming from like the kids rising up almost. It's such a great feeling that I feel like I can relate so much, because I felt like they did when I was their age, and now I want to tell them, I want to hang with you. I want to be help you out. I want to help you with what your heart is feeling. Are these besides the philosophies and the things on the reservation and people? I mean, I know we're all working to keep the ceremonies alive and things like that. Are there initiatives that the kids on the reserves are doing that you know about, or Indigenous folks around the world?
Everywhere I go in Indigenous places, hamlets and strongholds, I would call them, from Peru to Bolivia to Colombia, even in Brazil, even in Europe, by the way, and Africa and Asia, Southeast Asia, the Pacific Islanders. There is that main theme running through everyone's vein, that it's the earth first. Really, it's not a threat. She's not a threat. She doesn't lie to you. Earth doesn't lie to you. So why are we speaking a language of manipulation? You see? So these languages, these earth languages I'm talking about, that's what the kids are born with. They don't know what a lie is. They don't know what money was. I didn't understand money till I was 14 years old. I couldn't get that piece of paper, either tongue in cheek or, how do you say, face value? But I couldn't get what money and why it turned people into the behavior it did. And I still don't get it. And I don't get along with money. It seems money wants to get along with me all the time or something. But when I'm thinking about Earth is all the generations. It's not a youth-driven society, a youth-driven peoples, because you need the elders, you need the young people, not just the young people. And we're going to bow down to the young people, because we say that if you cut down all the trees, the old trees, the young trees, and you come back and you only plant trees, and they all grow up the same age. They're all growing up at the same age. There's no elders, and there's dysfunction. Everybody's the same age. There's no one to take advice from, and so everybody's elbow rooming and right and wrong, and that's what's happened here. So I would say investing in Native peoples who know who they are, who are not trying to work the system to get ahead and get noticed, is the fact that these Indigenous folks are actually the elders, at least in North America and South America. We are the elders of the land, and we know how to live with the earth, and that's going. That's going very fast. And maybe it's supposed to. Maybe our time is done, some people say. And I've been studying languages for a long time, since 6 years old, because that's why I speak this one. Um, is that, you know, the last I've heard, there was close to 6,700 languages spoken entirely in the world. Now, mind you, there were more languages spoken in the Western Hemisphere when Columbus got here than the entire world combined, you see. But now in the world, there are 6,700 languages, and I think 75% of those languages are indigenous, and those languages are going extinct. There's 10, 12, every year you hear about, every month you hear about different languages going extinct, and those are the coded languages of the plants, of all the animals, and the movement of the moon and the stars, the cosmos are embedded. The quantum physics is embedded in these languages that have no nouns. So when you have a language without nouns, you're speaking in motion, you're speaking about aliveness, and there's no need for concepts. There's no need for an alphabet, you see, because we communicate differently. And I think that's what the young folks, for me as an older person, going through that time, as you see, I've spoken when I was real young in front of big audiences. And in those times, I thought no one was listening either. It's just that I didn't understand as well as I thought I did, because I was a little full of myself. And look at me, I'm young and I'm talking in front of you, I'm getting noticed. But I began to understand that without my elders, I couldn't go any further. So I think this youth-driven environmental movement is coming from the West, whereas you can go home and ask the elders and they'll say, you're going where to? An environmental what? Because the word doesn't exist in our language. Because why are we apart from the environment? Because we can't say we're part of, we are that. You see, we've always thought these things. And now I hear the trending language that's going out there among intellectuals and scientists and physicists, and they're using all this language that we already understand. And we understood, all of us understood this when we were children. It's just that we educated the wisdom out of ourselves. Yeah.
So do you see a bridge? Do you see a bridge? I'm sorry, Heidi. Do you see a bridge between the traditional way of thinking and language, and how do we build a bridge so that you know, we can help the earth?
A bridge. I see a bridge. Well, I know there were bridges in that sense, but we build a different bridge. I mean, there's one already built, and I think that has to be with a spiritual bridge, not a religious or dogma or based on science or measuring or weighing or quantifying anything. It has to do with spirituality, that light that we are seeking to show us the way is always there. We've been told about the darkness. We've been told about the duality of good and evil, the right and wrong, the duality. And in indigenous languages, in the deeper ones, where you can understand so many things going on at once because you're involved on a conscious in the balance of the consciousness, right? So we're really coalescing with innocence. And I say this to everyone because, you know, every moment that we are here is innocent. There's no guilt. And this is not a word that we have in the older language, the guilt, the sin, or the blame. That's somebody else. That came over here and laid that on us. And so if every moment is innocent, we don't acknowledge that because we think that's stupidity. We think that's lack of intelligence. But all intelligence means is between the lines. And so who is talking about the mystery? Who's being in the mystery? We don't have to define the mystery if the mystery's already defined you. You see, we don't have to, in a sense, to put it simpler, we don't grow food. Food grows us, you see, and we just have to pay attention to that. We have to acknowledge that there is the innocent. We're all innocent. You know, we every step we take, breath is innocence. And we don't know how to acknowledge that. And that to me is the consciousness that this so-called new world is that to understand and acknowledge every moment is innocent, because that's what it is.
I want to just really thank you for what you're saying. It's absolutely beautiful. And I have not heard anyone speak as you are speaking to these issues, and I'm just really blown away by it. So thank you. And I love what you're saying about um, respecting our elders. I feel that there is kind of it's beautiful the kids are rising up. It's beautiful they're joining and they care, you know, and that's a lovely thing. But I think I really agree with you that it's important that we not lose sight that there are really wise people on the planet who are and wise beings, not just humans, and that we listen and we don't just become obsessed with young people because they're, you know, and not, there's nothing wrong with that, as I'm saying, but I just think it's really great what you said. And I want to thank you for that. And I think there's also something I've noticed in my life that as a woman who's getting older, you know, that there's a wisdom that women hold. And in our culture, which is so focused on youth, we've lost some of that, and I'm noticing myself finding a respect for older women who really hold a lot of knowledge and have so much to offer. And so I, you know, I'm just echoing what you're saying, and it's a really important piece that I'm valuing in the women that I'm encountering who are older than I am. And I grew up so much reverence for youth and beauty, and you know, that's kind of youth culture, which is great. But there's also this very powerful, important knowledge that our elders have. And I wanted to ask you if someone wanted to study and learn from you, how would they do that?
I, I don't, I don't. That's a hard question to answer. Um, I think by understanding rather than what's your takeaway, what are you giving to? What are you giving to this? What focus, attention, intelligence are you engaged in right now? Are you listening? Are you trying to write questions in order to get an answer out of it? So, in other words, what I want to say is that in relationship to the elders, this is maybe a story a little bit in this tract here is that in the old Lakota way, is what I'm told is the elders go into the future. The elders are the future because they go ahead of us, and we, the younger behind, go follow them. Now, if there's that eldership is taken away in society and civilization, you have a bunch of young people looking for elders. Like the 60s hippies had no elders, and they became CEOs and presidents, and you know, and look what's going on. And they forgot to look down. They were told to look up, like some savior was going to come out. So we've evolved or devolved or developed into a salvation point mentality that somebody outside of yourself is going to tell you how to live this life, when that's only an experiment by experience of somebody else. So therefore we want to experiment with somebody else's knowledge. And so what I'm saying is we have to experience our ownness, if that's the word, our ownness, and to understand every moment that we live, again, is innocent. And once you feel that innocence and are able to express it, not in this language or any language at all, because it'll have to do with receiving, I guess I would say, because of how much you've given. It's not a given reward system with nature. That's something that's on its way out. So when you're open to that, when the whole of you understands from your dream time to your wake time to your nap time to your eating, everything is made to care for you. All of this around me was made to care for me. The music, the art, the language, everything was made to care for us and it's doing a damn good job. We're just not doing a good job with it, you know. And so I think in that way, Heidi, if they wanted to learn from me, it's just I learned from the radio. I learned from the guest I have had on there for 28 years now, from very famous to people to a 96-year-old to a 4-year-old. So it's how you take all of those energies, because in that world of energy, there's no age. That's why I say the earth is all the generations. It's just not the seventh generation, because every generation is the seventh generation, you see? And if we get along, if we try that timeline, that linear line there, we're going to get stuck on it. And we're going to go off track with the continuum, which is always here. Now, I'm using this language that doesn't express myself very well. So, I think there's something to learning another language that's not romanced language, that is something to do with an earth language, without trying to have to put it back into the box that we come from. Because it's about the fox in the box. Now the box is gone. Now what? You see, now what?
So now, before we go to questions, I just, from the audience, from people listening, I wanted to ask you about the philosophy of the circle. And when you say things to me about like the young kids don't have elders to speak with, and they're following the ancestors. I mean, I've always been taught about the circle and how every part of us and every part of the earth works in a circular way, as Black Elk said, And I wonder if that comes up for you in like you're speaking to people, if that somehow can help to explain or make people understand a little better that philosophy.
Oh, yeah, that philosophy of the circle. I think we're born with it, as you see, and if you've been to the southern hemisphere, it goes the opposite. In the northern hemisphere, it goes the opposite. So we're going opposite. If we see the full moon, if we see half the moon waxing here, we see it waning. I think in the southern hemisphere, I'm not so sure, but I think I've experienced that. So when we talk about the circle, it's the most perfect shape that nature has ever invented or devised. And it's our oracle. We know that it involves relationship. We know that it's the relationship that connects the connection, as you say, and it will never change. All the other shapes, the rectangle, the triangle, the square, all these change, and it never is a continuum, because they're built upon right angles and lines, linear lines, beginning and end. And you have to join them somehow, but the circle is always changing and always moving as the universe. So that cosmology, see, I'm having to explain in a language I won't understand. And I don't like saying that you won't understand, is that you have to listen a little bit more to what we're trying to say, and from this energy, this nasula, these words don't come from me and my brain. I'm only talking about what I've been told from other older Lakota. Some have grown up and were born in the 1800s. And when I was a little kid, these old hands were reaching out and holding my little hand as a 4, 5, 6-year-old. And they were holding my hand who were born in the 1870s, the 1880s, and they were holding my hand. So it's just that exchange of energy that we disavow because they're not here now. And that's why I say when the circle is complete, and it's the thinking process is part of the circle. We're only talking about half of the circle here, because it's based upon classism and privilege. And I have to write in your language, I have to speak in your language. But when I speak in my language, I'm speaking in the circle all the time. You see, I have to put a capital and a period at the end of it. Say, I started here and I ended here. And in the other languages, which without nouns, they're continually understanding the motion. So there's no need to speak all the time. So the circle expresses itself when the circle expresses itself within you. So I would say it's that way, Dennis, and we could do the old cliche that that we hear, touch the earth. Books came out with, and that romanticizes us, right? And is that, or we're not saying the things that we're supposed to do. We're not playing the tunes and tapping our feet and playing the flute and drum and dancing around like they expect us to do, right? That's over with. We're not doing that anymore. We're here for the earth. We're not here to please you, a society that is still packaging things to bring over so that you understand it. You see, so yeah.
There's a really good question here I'd love to ask from Caitlin. She says, I feel so entrenched in the technology-driven and modernity of the westernized world. It's the only world I know. How does one open themselves, find connection, begin to listen to the earth?
Well, Earth has been listening to you from the beginning. That's why you're here. You've always been connected. She's found you because she's been listening to you. That's how you breathe. She's already opened you up. It's not the only world. The westernized world especially is not the only world. I know. I live in it, but I know that I can leave it anytime I want. And yes, technology is an addiction. It's driving its needle deeper into you and trying to make you forget that you're entrenched in it, that you come up with rationalities, and there is no exit from that. And so modern times, what is that? That's somebody's control mechanism. Again, we all, again, when I think about, okay, they say, well, Tiokasin, you don't fit here. What are you doing in the city? Shouldn't you be out in the mountains or by a river and playing the flute and what? No, I'm supposed to be here. I'm doing this because maybe I can answer some questions, right? But I'm not going to give you a complete answer to that because that would be too easy. You need to experience it. There's a lot of young people running from the city. They're coming up here and they're like, what? Well, I'll have to tell on a young friend of mine who I met recently. She had come to the Catskills and she she went to buy a used car. And she thought it was like going to shop. That it came with everything and packaged. And then she said, what? We have to register? What? We have to get licensed? What? We have to get inspected? So all these things that she didn't know, now she knows because she got away from that technology, from that concrete jungle, and she's looking, and all the other folks that have come with her are now gazing at the stars that they've never seen before. So yes, it's about getting away from technology, putting Facebook away, and really understanding there was people who grew up without this, and this is why you're here, is that they brought you this far, and now it's up to you to maybe not want to be addicted to this technology, to this way of thinking that we need technology, right? I mean, yes, we always need it, but not like a glutton. We don't need all this technology. The Kogi was asked about Fukushima, and they went to Fukushima Daiichi 2 years after, and I was there too, and they were asked a question, what do you think about Fukushima? And they said, without ever reading books, they said, you don't need more technology to try to solve a problem that technology created. That's not Einsteinism. It's spinning wheels. There is not a technology that can solve that problem right now, but we don't hear about it. It's not solving the problem of burning a hole into the earth, right? But we go with it because that's the way we've been programmed. So look at your programming, I think would be part of that. Good question.
Yeah, that was a great question. We have another one. This person I believe, is very much into, I guess, exploring what you mean by the word wild. And I think that it sounds like, well, I'll read it a little bit, especially in the context of decolonizing the Western human mind. I'm interested in Tiokasin Ghosthorse's definition of wild. I would like to know what he thinks of rewilding as a movement that's taking roots in Native American suburbs. Replacing monoculture lawns with native plants feels like restoring biodiversity to dead areas of land. It's restoring dignity and appreciation for all of life, all beings. And says rewilding is a global movement as a way to return to the land itself, perhaps as a way to return to the earth.
That's also a question I get from the folks, the young people that I work with around the globe when I could, is that, yes, they ask me the same question. I say, how about turning that around? That maybe you're understanding that you need to be rewilded. You need to do things with spirit now, not just rationality. To be tamed, to be educated, to be civilized took you away from that with spirit, that wild out there, because look what the West has done to that wild. And the earth is wild. Earth is with spirit. So our education, our domination factors, the thinking in domination now in Lakota, there is no word or concept for domination. You see, so our language is all in relationship. So when we begin to see that the earth is already wild, right, is that we are only rewilding ourselves. We're getting familiar with that. We don't have to rewild the earth. If you want to take it down a building, yeah, I guess you'd call that rewilding. You know, that's just getting rid of something that shouldn't have been there anyway. And so, you know, I don't advocate destruction or anything. I just advocate, man, there's got to be a softer way to do this, you know, because Earth doesn't want destruction. She wants you to get it, basically. And once we are able to get it, we start treating the Earth the same way she's treating us, not an enemy, but she is nurturing us. And so when we think about rewilding the Earth, she's re-nurturing us, not naturing us, re-nurturing us. So nature doesn't exist in Lakota. It's nurturing. This is an action she's doing. So when you don't have domination, you're talking and thinking and feeling and being in a relationship with something and somebody and all things at once. And wow, what a mind that is, to have all of that. That's your mind. So it's like your body is in the soul rather than soul only in your body. Your body is in the soul, and that's the earth. And there's not much to do to rewild the earth. There may be some work in learning how that exists within you. That's another great question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel there's a I always felt when I listened to the two philosophies almost that there's like 180 degree. That's what I love about the way you turn things over, because I always felt like there was this feeling of some people feeling that they never had enough. At the same time, we have people who feel like we have more than enough. Like the earth gives us everything that we need here. It's just, are we living our lives as if we can accept that we have everything we need, or are we living our lives thinking we always need more, and we keep taking and taking and taking? And it always felt like a total opposite feeling for me. So,
yeah, I mean, growing up Native, not before I was a Native American, right? I'm not an American, because if you go to the etymology of this language we speak, what does America mean? America, right? Ame means the love of, and Rika means a feminine form of riches. So one who loves riches is not a Native. It's kind of a difference there. Shouldn't even go together. Native is not an American. An American is not a Native. You see what I mean? But when I go back to all the land was one, is that we all came from that one land and we split apart. That story hasn't been told enough, because we can't prove it according to the Western world, who dominates this social media, this language, the history, the education, and we can't prove it. But we say that the proof is that we're here. And we can't understand that with just only this part of ourselves. We have to understand and feel the whole expression. And the land itself remembers that. The land is the DNA, the land is who we are. And if we are able to learn how to express it, I really feel that already we've come a long way. We see the attention given to the young people. We see the attention given now, excuse me, we see the attention given now to the earth. But I think there's more on the way. I think there are signs that we need to pay attention to: the heat, the less water, the dislocation of water, the melting ice caps. We can be in terror with that or accept that that's what she does, regardless of how much we think that we are part of it. Yes, we could be part of it. And I think we do need to stop calling those folks who are primitive native people as anything that are opposite. I mean, I say this because we are not cynics. We just know the truth. We know how to deal with lie. The earth does not lie. So if you're dealing with a mindset that is lying to the earth won't put up with it. And those peoples who are calling the indigenous folks in their language as primitive and not evolved, well, it takes more intelligence to learn how to live with the earth than we've been told how to live on the earth and put a plan on the earth, you see. So is there much more to learn? Is there much more to learn how to listen? You see, I think it's that part. And I think getting out of the Western world, the Western mindset will heal you. And I've had this so throughout my life. I have non-native friends who got out of the mindset. And I think it was the guy, Robert Clemens is his name, Mark Twain. He said, I was educated once. It took me years to get over it. Right?
Samuel Clemens, yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
When you, I people talk a lot today about, eco-anxiety and eco-grief, which is, again, this terminology, but I think it's something that I do relate to. I feel sad, when I'm in certain places, like I see malls and box stores and freeways, and I think, what we've done, right, or the poisons we're putting into the earth. What do you think about that kind of grief, and how can people deal with that?
I think of children. I don't grieve in that sense that I know Earth will actually be able to handle. We can't destroy the Earth. We can't change the Earth. I mean, how arrogant is that for us to think that we can actually destroy the Earth? But we can only, as uncles would say to me, we can only destroy our way of living on the Earth, right? So I think that's what we're doing. And when I think about when all this virus thing happened, is I was happy, and I don't know why I was happy. And I can safely say now, 20 years, 30 years later, that 9/11, like, whoa, that was a hit. And I remember kind of being, yes, right? And then taking my pipe out and praying. I was in New York. I prayed because I knew whoever thought these things, whoever plotted these things, well, that was the mindset that we forgot to pray for. So when everybody is polluting and paying somebody else, they'll clean it up. The earth will clean it up, right? I think that's disrespecting themselves and the beings around. We could say the consumer mind, but really assumption is the consumption, right? We assume too much of the earth, that she can do this and she can do that. But why aren't we asking the indigenous folks? Because they know what earth does, because they're actually in that physical reality with her. And we're not going to see them all the time in front of people. Some will speak up and then they'll disappear for years, and some you'll never hear from again, because that's the way of our people. There's not one general distinct leader out of all of us, because we're all a whole, a new relationship. We are Teoshpaye, we are an extended family, and each of us has a responsibility to speak up when we're supposed to speak up. It's not elect a president and he's going to speak for all of us. That's a Western I don't know, dogmatic way of government and things. And I think that's changing. I think the earth is speaking right now. Geez, I don't know where I went with that, Heidi, but I went with it.
No, it was good. It was good. Dennis, do you want to take some of the questions? I feel bad because I keep asking so many questions.
Well, that's okay. It's great. Well, I have a friend of mine who is an activist and I think activism comes from a feeling of seeing something that you want to help. You want to help. You want to help change. You know, and I think she does that. But she asks, as an activist, have you ever felt discouraged? And how do you help yourself to keep it up and continue your work?
Wow, that's a great question. I'm asked that a lot. And if I was in my head, I'd say burnout. I'd say burned out, you know, but I'm not in my head. And I go to the earth and I sit and I listen and I get the strength from there. I don't retreat. I don't get away from civilization because the earth is who I am, excuse me. So I've never burned out. I'm an activator as the earth is activating. You see, to be an activist is something, but an activator, or you're doing something because you're in that energy now. So you're employed by the earth, as my brother Orville would say. You're employed by the earth, and she's never going to fire you. Once you become an activist, then an activator. That doesn't mean organize this and go out there and, you know, more resources to get a point across. No, it changes you, not as an individual, but you change because you understand the acknowledge, you understand the energy, and that attracts and rubs off into other folks, younger folks, older folks, and you get them to think, because we need people to think. Now I say think, it's here. And we need people to think and feel what they think and think what they feel, because that's what changes. It's not the stats and facts and the experts and the scientists, and we're judging everything else and we're trying to, you know, qualify ourselves by quantifying everything. No, it's what you do. What are you, who are you with the earth? Because she knows who you are. I think we have forgotten her, that she knows who we are. And I think that's what we're in the search of, who am I? And there's the conjunctive, I think it's conjunctive to be, or it's I don't know what it is, but to be doesn't exist in Lakota. To be something, to become something, to be. You see, now the Western mind is engaged. I want to be other than who I am. So if you're into to be, that's defocusing, diffusing who you are. So the language, the etymology of your language, by the way, 60% of this language we're speaking is Latin. And that Latin has to do with reason and logic from those Pleiades and Plato, Plato and Socrates, that time, right? And when all men are created equal. And all these men who are created equal said, well, that one doesn't own property, so you can't vote, right? We know this has been remedied somewhat, but the treatment is still the same. Bigger landholders hold more power in the society. CEOs, you have more power. You can delegate, you can relegate. And then women, always on the bottom, trying to live up, even trying to, you know, mimic the power structure or something, when they forget that they're really close and intuitively close to the earth. And then there's those indigenous folks, the ones who could not be tamed and civilized, because they were the most dangerous, because they had the consciousness of the earth, because citizenry and democracy and all the isms out there of government want to get you away from your relationship with the earth, because that's the greatest intelligence. And that's what I'm saying. We think from the earth, we pray with the earth. Our bodies are in the soul, right? Our bodies are in the soul of the earth. And so once you find those relationships, there's really not much else you can burn out from, because you're always related. I know this sounds somewhat inspiring and, you know, cheerleading and things, but you have to start living that now, because we need you. You can't be just doing your best. You have to do what's required. And now I'm telling you what's required is that you are employed by the earth and you will never get fired.
That's fabulous. And I think if you're speaking to that young person who's an activist or an active person, that obviously if they can keep that connection to the earth and see that they are needed, and the earth is with them, and they're not, you know, fighting. They're actually passing on their message, and they're doing what they're supposed to be doing because it's coming from their heart. So they're following their heart and they're doing that, and that's what can kind of keep them on a good path so that they don't get that burnout where they feel like they're fighting. Instead, they feel like they're just following their heart. I think that's what you're trying to say. I don't want to put words in your mouth.
No, you can't, Dennis. You can't put words in my mouth. Don't do that, Dennis.
Yeah, I found that out.
No, you're good. You're good with that. No, I think that the questions, you know, there need to be said, but what if there were no questions? What if there was no need to answer?
Mm-hmm.
You see, you in this world, it's a cause and effect. I ask you, you give me the answer. It's a memory pattern. You give me, I give you, and it's this. You give me this, I expect that from you. So the expectant society, and now we're not getting what we expect, so we're disappointed. So everybody's getting disappointed and depressed, and you know they're even getting. They're fiending, I guess you call it, fiending from not having. People are, and like I say, the computer is only a small population of the world, but the population of the small population of the world wants all the population of the world to have a computer, you know, and so more of this communication is being lost because it's technology and artificial intelligence is actually starting to run that world at least, but not the world that I'm looking outside the window, right? It's a difference.
There's a great question here from Stephanie. When you said you saw the pandemic coming after 1992, do you see anything now? Hope, destruction of our climate, our planet, healing?
Okay, yeah. I'll go back to, you know, what a lot of people in this society disagree with when I say there is no hope. Now, how do you feel about there is no hope? Do you feel panicking? What do we do now? Well, the reason why I say that if we hope, that means we're going to sit around and wish for something and hope it happens. So without hope, you have to do what's required. You see, and I take that from my people having to survive massacres, to survive the Western onslaught that's still going on today of taking our lands. And you've heard the story. So when I asked people who actually were understanding the way I did, they said, yeah, I mean, we could get that. We can wait for the government to be nice, and these people, we can hope for them to be nice and give us a handout. But all the while, the earth was talking to us saying, don't depend on that. Depend on the earth, you know? And if you see that plant growing, you see, as long as life is there, that you will have life. But we're not paying attention to that. We're paying attention to the supermarket and how come our shops are closed? How come I can't go down to the nearest restaurant and grab an easy dish? You know, these are the things that our patterns are as the way they are. Yes, and all these questions are so good. And when I think about this pandemic, you know, go back to the word pan. Pan was, I think, a god in Greece, I think. Maybe Heidi can help me with this. He was a god in Greek mythology who went into the forest and spread fear so that the people would run from the forest. And that was Pan. So now we use panic and pandemic. So it's all embedded with fear to begin with, Pan. And so that's what we're accepting as, oh, that's what everybody else is using. Now it's time to evolve a different language. The language that we got as Indigenous folks, and Dennis, if you have a different story, that would be great, is as Indigenous folks all over the world, our language comes from the earth. And our language, the Lakota, came from the Black Hills, which is the geographical center of Turtle Island, as you know, at the United States or North America. So the languages we were given was through nature. And English is somewhat coming from that, but not really. It's coming from the minds of humans, how to control, classify, and to, basically manipulate any feelings you have left. And so when I think about the hope and the pandemic and what's to come, I'm like, no, if we're going to go forward into the future, we don't know that, so we're going to fear it. We go far back there, we think, oh, it's never going to be like it was, so we're going to fear that because we don't know what's here now. Yes, the pandemic is here, you can call it, but it's fear. Are we dealing with fear? Are we coming up with new psychological classes or psychological, I don't know what you call it, nodes or something to describe all this that the Western world really hasn't been through? And when I talked earlier, it said that we've been through this before. So when it hit the nations as it is now, the nations being Native nations, there are some that have really stayed with the tradition, the medicines, and we survived. Yes, we are humans too, and we will be affected by the same virus, but it's also how we take. And I'd like to maybe quote someone from back home who said Tiokasin, that the Lakota, we still know how to die, but the white man still knows how to create killing. And I say create killing to create fear. And what's that fear created by, but except through the controlling of media and the written word, you see? So if we don't know how to grieve, going back to Heidi's question, if we don't know how to grieve, we're never going to know how to praise, because that comes in one breath. You live and die every moment. You breathe in, you breathe out, and that's every moment. So every moment is innocent. So there's a whole world out there. There's a whole world out there. If we look, we just think with our heart, be with our heart. Yeah, and I don't know, English is so least expressive that I get tired because it's trying to come out and it can't.
No, I think that's very understandable. I think it's beautiful. I feel okay ending here, Heidi, unless you feel good. I don't want to end without, just mentioning that Tiokasin is also a fabulous musician, and I know I definitely want you to mention any kind of CDs or music that people can hear from you about, and books or anything that you have that are going to help people to follow up on what we've been talking about, and hopefully continue on this message.
Yeah, I think those of you who are in the cities, maybe get out for a little bit, get away from the cities and see the stars, because as 75% of Americans cannot see the stars. Where I was born, you see them from a horizon to horizon. You want to just reach out and bring one down to earth. So it's a difference in perception also. So the music that I play is a flute and singing and traditionally, but it's not in the sense of the ceremonial way. It's more like an improv of what I've learned in the outer world that I'm living in now, and bringing and understanding the inner world that has never left from the Lakota people, because we've always asked for the instructions from the stars, basically. Wichasha means, doesn't mean human being, it means gift of the stars. And because we don't have a word for human being, we only have Wichasha. It's a gift from the stars. So we understand the cosmology is much bigger than what we see with our brain. So this music follows that in a sense. There's a few albums. One's Ksa, K-S-A, which means wisdom. kindness, shortness. It's of a wisdom, and it's by Ghosthorse. And one word, by the way, Ghosthorse. And there's another one in there somewhere. And then there's from the Continuum. And there's a book. Excuse me. Then there's a book, Butterfly Against the Wind, and it talks about the butterfly in South Dakota. And in South Dakota, there's lots of wind. And the butterfly, you watch him, he can go maybe 10 yards in a day. But that butterfly figures out how to get 10 yards with the great wind. And that takes a lot of strength. And then sooner or later, the butterfly reaches where it's supposed to go. And sometimes that wind works with, and he understands that the wind, if you just let myself go, the wind will come around in a circle and get me to that spot. So it's appreciation watching and being with the earth. Yeah. Other than that, the First Voices, indigenousradio.org is the website. But like you said, Dennis, First Voices Radio is heard on 100 FM stations, a couple of AM stations from Chicago to Los Angeles, San Diego, to any place in Winnipeg. Actually, it's going to be heard in Berlin and Stuttgart pretty soon in Germany. So it's not me. It's the consciousness of the earth. It's a consciousness of indigenous peoples, the earth languages, who are still there because they have been there all the time. They have sustained the earth. And we're not about developing the earth. We're about thriving with the earth rather than trying to grow the earth or the growth mentality. That's just like, that's done. That's the manifest destiny. It's finished. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much, Tiokasin, and thank you, Heidi and Dennis, and all of you who joined us tonight. I know you gave us a lot of beautifully inspiring concepts I'll be meditating. I'm sure we'll all be meditating on. And we hope you join us again next Tuesday. We'll be back with another A Green New Future, and our guests, which Heidi, if you want, you can tell them a little bit about, are Gina Belafonte and Beatrice Finn. So they'll be joining us for that. And just a reminder, if you have signed up for Green New Future on Eventbrite, you don't have to, you'll automatically be getting emails and getting links as well from us. So thank you so much to everyone who has signed up.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Just quickly, Beatrice Finn is a Nobel Peace Prize winner 2017 for the treaty to abolish nuclear weapons that was signed at the UN. And her work with her organization they're doing international work to really work on disarmament and nuclear abolition. And Gina Belafonte is the daughter of Harry Belafonte, who was a movie star and a singer and a major civil rights activist. And little known to a lot of people in our generation, he was also an anti-nuclear activist. He was very concerned about nuclear war. And he worked, and they're in that movement, which is really interesting, in the 1950s and early 60s, there was a real alliance between the civil rights activists and those who were concerned about nuclear war, and they worked together. And that will be part of our conversation next week. So thank you.
Thank you all. Have a great night.
Great, Tiokasin. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tiokasin. It was amazing.
Thank you. Oh, one more thing. Can I say this?
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
There's one way to look at life, which is the Western way. And then there is the other way to look at life. You get that? There is expression. And then there's the linear way to read books and stay within that, or to express yourself.
Great. Thank you.
You'll get that, but yeah.
Flash tape.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And we'll leave you with Dennis's song.